So, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to yet another video here on the Free Flies YouTube channel. And today we're going to be doing the RDS removal tutorial. Removing an RDS, as simple as it might be, there's a little bit of nuance to it, and there's certain techniques and things that, if you know, make the process a lot easier, a lot faster, and also less of a risk of you losing either it be the jump or any part of your gear that you're removing. You'll understand why I mean this in a few seconds along the video. So let's start with what is an RDS. Removable deployment system, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is a mechanism that allows you to remove, like it's mentioned, all the deployment system. Your parachute does not require a bunch of the things it has to fly. For instance, you only use the pilot chute to open the container and remove the deployment bag. You only use the deployment bag to contain the parachute while the deployment is happening until line stretch. You only use your slider to slow down the opening so that it's not, a huge violent explosion. This is not required for you to fly your parachute efficiently. And when you're flying a high-performance parachute, even a medium performance parachute, let's say, there's no such thing as a medium performance parachute, but you know what I mean, like anything cross-braced, I think, should be using a removable slider, or at least removable slider, and full RDS would be the ideal thing. And also, even with katanas and whatnot, if you use a removable slider, you get used to the motions of assembling it, disassembling it, storing it, and it will translate to when you have more experience. Basically, it's one thing that if you learn while you're flying a big parachute, when you have a lot more canopy time, it's going to be one less thing for you to be learning as you progress onto faster parachutes that give you less time under canopy and also require you to be more concentrated in controlling the actual parachute. So with this being said, now that you guys understand what the RDS is, let's actually get started with the removal part. Before I speak about the removal, I just want to mention one last thing. Let's talk about the anatomy of a full RDS system. You have your slider, it's the removable slider. You have the RDS lanyard that attaches a slider to the pilot chute in this Y shape. You've got the bridle, the deployment bag, and the pilot chute itself. All of this is removed with one simple motion and needs to be stored on your RDS pocket. Whether it be on your swoop pants, which is the most common place you'll be putting it. You can put it on your belly band, and also you can just put it down your shirt. A lot of people ask me, oh, I jump with a jumpsuit, how do I use my removable, how do I use the removable slider or removable deployment system? Well, it's pretty simple. If you just remove your slider and you jump in maybe a cold environment where you don't want to open your suit, and trust me, if you're doing jumps where you're being sweaty and you're jumping all day, you're sweating a little bit, even if it's cold, as soon as you open your suit, all the air from the canopy flying rushes into your suit and it absolutely chills you. So maybe you don't want to jump like that. So in the absolutely cold environments where you can't open your suit and you want to jump at least a removable slider, that's what I would recommend. Attach only the removable slider, attach the pilot chute to the top skin of your canopy, and you can put the slider on your leg strap and you can kind of lock it in there and it's not going to be coming out off. I've seen people putting the slider on the belly band, and if you're a little bit on the plus side, maybe it holds it there, but I've also seen it fly off more times than I've seen it keep there. So put it on your leg strap. It's not too uncomfortable. If you jump a full RDS, what you're going to have to do is open your jumpsuit a little bit to put the removable slider, not on the jumpsuit, not on the open jumpsuit because it's going to be tight, but on the t-shirt. If you're wearing a t-shirt, you can put, or even if you're wearing thermal layers, you can put it in between a thermal layer and your underwear layer, let's say, and it's going to stay there. It's going to look like you have big boobs, but it's a simple tip, hack, so to speak. I know a lot of you guys do it, so it's not really news for anyone, but it's just a tip. Now, if you want to jump, I'm going to assume that you've got swoop pants with a swoop pocket for the RDS. And if you've got it on the belly band, which is just as fine, it's easy to put it there. So it's all the same, but I'm going to be referring to the technique of putting it on your pocket, just because it's a little bit extra complex in a sense that there's more steps to make it easier. It's the same amount of complexity, but if you want to make it easier, there's one or two more tips that I can give you guys. So let's start right from the opening, and then we'll go from there. So from the opening, you open your parachute, and normally, what you're told is look at your parachute, make sure you're taking care of the opening. I've got an opinion. You might consider it controversial, but, whatever. You can battle it out in the comments if I'm wrong. If you're flying a parachute that requires or, justifies a full RDS or even a removable slider, I would assume it's a fast parachute that you want to fly fast. Even if it's not, super high wing loading, it's still something that you're looking forward to flying fast, whether it be like a Katana, a Crossfire, that type of parachute, or even a JFX or a Velocity. That type of parachute is the one that's where you're going to have your first removable slider. Those were the ones that I had my first removable slider. And so those parachutes, you're jumping them to go fast. And if you're jumping them with the goal of going fast, it means they're sensitive parachutes. They fly fast, and they have equally sensitive openings. A lot of people have trouble with high-performance openings because they're not ready for a high-performance parachute. They might have stand-up landings, but they're not ready for the opening. And you need to be ready for all of the steps of a high-performance parachute to fly a high-performance parachute. So when you have these types of parachutes, Velocities, JFXs, etc., I don't really feel that you gotta look at the parachute to make sure the opening is good. Because if there's a problem with the opening, the parachute is gonna tell you right away. It's gonna start spinning out of control. I get that when you're flying a big parachute, you need to make sure you visually check if there's no broken lines, if there's no rips on the canopy, because a ripped canopy can mean you're not noticing it until you flare, because that's when you're using the most of the canopy. And this can be tragic. We've seen this happen a few times. Even with tandems, I've heard of it happening. People not checking, not double fluttering to check if the canopy is flying good, and then it collapses on the landing. With a high-performance canopy, I can guarantee you that there's no cross-braced canopy on the market that you would not feel it being different, just having a broken line or having a big enough rip for it to be considered cutaway worthy. I think, again, I can be wrong. If you think I'm wrong, and you can write in the comments. So I think opening the parachute and immediately looking up, and it's not really necessary. I think it's better that you look forwards, guarantee the heading on the opening, especially if you're jumping with a group, than looking up. But okay, look up. It's better to predict problems than not to, even though you can feel even line twists. You can feel anything on a high performance parachute. Once the opening is done, the first thing that I do as soon as the slider touches the risers is to pull the slider down below the front riser loops. This is because the slider shaking around on the front riser loops causes damage to the attachment of the lines to the soft link, and then the soft link to the riser, of course, if they stay there like flapping up and down. When you go to the drop zone, if you pay attention to this region that I'm mentioning on multiple parachutes, from high performance to beginners, you'll see that they either have protection there or they're worn out, unless it's, of course, a new line set. Sometimes they're extremely worn there, and it's one of the first telltale signs of when you should change your line set, because they start getting black from a little bit of the polish that's embedded onto the slider rings, and also from being burned with time. So that's the first thing I do. As soon as the slider touches, sometimes it doesn't even have time to flap once or twice. I just pull it down, because air will cup the slider and it will hold it in place. It will not be flapping, and it will be right and easy to remove. After that, the slider is stabilized. The first thing that I do is I open up the leg strap, the leg pocket for the RDS. This is because sometimes, depending on the type of jump that you have, depending on how well the rig fits you, depending on a lot of factors, the leg strap can cover the opening of the RDS pocket. And then once you start removing the slider, you'll have both hands occupied, or sometimes even the right hand occupied and the left hand is free. And therefore, you cannot comfortably open the pocket. Or even if you can, it's going to take you a lot more time, because you got to do it either with the wrong hand, or you got to kind of do it with the hand that's holding the slider. It's not too easy. So do it. Takes like 1 second. Just run your thumb through the mouth of the pocket, and it will make sure it's open and ready to receive the RDS. After that, I remove the slider with one nice motion. Of course, you got to remove it through the back because the lanyard is flying back. I know that some people remove it through the front. I have seen this happen, and this is fine, really. The problem is that if you get used to removing it through the front, once you start having an RDS, you're going to have to relearn it. So removing it from the back is the most common way of doing it, and it's the correct way of doing it. After you remove it, bundle it up on your hand and start wrapping around the lanyard to the slider itself, to the slider all folded up itself. What this will do is it will create a nice rigid piece of material that will be both rigid for you to slide it in your pocket, and also it will be easier to contain on the next step. Also, make sure that the cables, if your slider uses cables, which most use, yellow lawn cables, make sure that they are aligned with the lanyard. So you're wrapping the lanyard on the cable as if the cable is a center tube. Because if you're bending up the cables, you're going to be wearing them prematurely, and they're going to be harder to use and have, in good shape for a longer time. Also, when you're removing the slider, you're putting twists on the lanyard, not the lanyard that's attaching the slider to the pilot chute, but the lanyard that's actually holding on the low-lawn cables. So once in a while, you do have to remove some of these twists. Otherwise, they'll become so twisted that they will actually start shrinking the size of the cable that attaches to the yellow cables. And then it can disconnect prematurely, of course, in an extreme situation. Once the slider stretches out, the cable, pulls on itself because it's all twisted, and it can cause some trouble. Not too common, and it usually doesn't get to this extreme. You'll notice before it gets to this amount of, extremeness, let's say. So after that, you've wrapped the lanyard on the slider, and you got to the deployment bag. I like to put the deployment bag inside, the slider inside of the deployment bag at this point. Some people do it differently. Some people grab the slider and then pick up big pieces of lanyard, and then put the pieces of lanyard all bundled up inside of the bag. What I've noticed that can happen with this, depending on how you store it, if you put it on the belly band or on the pants, is that a little bit of lanyard, because it's not rolled up, it's not contained, a little bit of lanyard can start, creeping out of your pocket, and, a little bit of lanyard creeping out at 160 kilometers per hour dive speed slowly builds up to the whole thing getting pulled. Or I've even seen, pieces of lanyard dancing around the reserve handles and whatnot, which is not positive sometimes. Imagine if you have it inside of your belly band, a piece of lanyard starts coming out, starts dancing around your cutaway cable, and if you have some sort of collision or a problem with your canopy due to turbulence or whatever, if you're trying to cut away in a pinch and you're trusting on the skyhook, if you have it, to deploy your reserve in time, maybe at 1,500 feet, very low cutaway, which of course you should only do if you know what you're doing. Guys, don't be a beginner doing this. This is for the people that are knowledgeable and know that their skyhook will be able to deploy their reserve in time. This is not for a low-speed cutaway where you're trusting the pilot chute to open your reserve. I mean, skyhook situation, extreme, save your life kind of situation is what I mean. In this type of scenario, let's say you have a lanyard attached to your cutaway handle, it can cause some inconvenience when you're cutting away. Once you're finished with this, you will have a slider wrapped around its lanyard inside of the deployment bag. I like to put it inside the deployment bag, and then I keep wrapping the bridle on the deployment bag. What this will create is this torpedo-shaped thing that is easy to slide inside of the pocket. After I'm finished with this, I will transfer the pilot chute. Before I don't wrap the pilot chute on anything. I transfer the pilot chute onto my left hand, and I grab the assembly all wrapped on the bridle with my right hand. And then with my right hand, the thumb and the index finger guide the way into my pocket. And then while I'm holding the pilot chute with my left hand, I put everything in my pocket, and then I grab the pilot chute and put the pilot chute in my pocket. What this is done, what I'm doing with this is guaranteeing that for some reason, while I'm putting the whole big assembly, that sometimes while you're wrapping this torpedo thing, it kind of creates a weird shape. If you're putting it inside, it breaks and it falls off of your pocket, you're still grabbing the pilot chute, so you'll still be able to grab the whole assembly. Now, after you're done with this, you've assembled the pilot chute, you've removed the slider, you're done. The rest of the process for me, pop down first I remove the chest strap, I wrap the chest strap on itself, attach it to an elastic, make sure it's clear of the reserve handle, either putting it inside or attaching it to something else. I actually have an altimeter near there, so I actually put it under the webbing, the main lift webbing. So it's away from my pilot chute and it's away from the altimeter, nice and clear. After that, I sit on the harness as much as possible, and this is the moment where the pilot chute, the RDS is already stored away, so you can really sit on the harness, and even if it covers the mouth, of course, of the pocket, it's not a problem. And after this, I'm comfortable. I pop down the rear slider rings, uninstall the toggles, and then you're ready to fly. And a couple of things to keep in consideration while you're doing this. It's, again, like I mentioned, good that you're learning to do this while you're learning your first canopy flying jumps. Maybe you got your first cross brace canopy, you buy a full RDS system, and you're doing hop and pops to practice 270s or 90s or whatever. Do this full procedure as fast and as cleanly as possible so that when you actually have to do it fast, you're comfortable. I'm going to give you an example. A lot of people jump from their day-to-day with like Leias, and then when they get to the competitions, they jump with Petras. What happens when they get to the competition is that they're used to storing either no slider, which is horrible, or just storing a simple piece of fabric, which is just a solo slider in itself. They're not used to wrapping it. So these type of people, they get to the competition and they're not used to being fast and being consistent with the timing of wrapping the slider. So they take a bunch of time doing it, or they're not comfortable with doing it. And while you're doing this type of thing, removing the slider, the canopy is, the brakes are set, yes. But Petras and Leias, the brakes aren't set super deep for the opening. They're, a little bit of a 50 to 30% braking. You can brake much, much more if you're actually flying the canopy with your hands instead of it being braking, by itself. So, someone's not used to removing the slider very fast. They take a whole bunch of time, and their canopy is just sinking and sinking because they're jumping at like 3.3 or whatever. Maybe they shouldn't. Maybe they should. I don't know. And then they take a whole bunch of time removing the slider, and then of course they're going to complain about either the person in front of them being too slow or the person behind them being too fast, when the problem is something that's rooted in a beginning of career type of thing. So learn how to store your slider well and properly right from the beginning, and you won't have problems. You'll be super fast. And I speak for myself. I learned it right from when I started. I was learning to remove the slider really, really fast. And then I do free fall jumps with the RDS. I've never had any trouble with the RDS giving me problems wrapping on anything. I've cut away before, but I think maybe a little bit of 2 or 3 of my cutaways are with full RDS. The rest is normal. So the RDS never caused me a cutaway. The cutaways have always been things that can also happen without the RDS. And if you're fast enough removing it, it's fine. If you want, you can open 500 feet higher and learn how to remove it. Because once you know how to fly your parachute with your body, and you can, store the RDS, wrap it and store it fast, consistently, and without having to look, you can do it through muscle memory. It's going to be a whole game changer for you. You get to jump out. You get to concentrate on looking at the canopy in front of you. So if you're doing a competition, that is. Of course, it also translates to normal skydiving. But during a competition, it's golden. You jump out, you look at the person in front of you, you see how they're flying, you see how they're behaving, and you can store the slider and see, okay, they are being fast. I can also sink a little bit so I can give a better gap for the person behind me. If you're being really slow, you have to keep the canopy as stable as possible so that it's not losing altitude. And you got to be as fast as possible storing the slider so that you can install your toggles and start flaring and braking and trying to slow down. This is golden. Being good at storing your slider is golden. And I recommend it. You start slow when you're doing like hop and pops and you're learning to swoop. Then you start getting faster and faster. Then you start doing it normally. Maybe you start opening at 4,500 feet. You take a little bit longer to store it. No big deal. You learn how to store it fast and you get consistent and you get used to doing it. Once you really have to be fast, like in a competition, it'll be second nature to you. It'll be no problem at all. I've personally been put in loads where I'm in the middle of really big, heavy guys, and I'm with my zone accuracy or freestyle canopy, so I'm slow. And I know that I want to give space to the person behind me, and at the same time, I want to be close to the person in front of me, even though they are maybe at much higher wing loading. I've been able to remove my slider while doing harness turns, carving, with a toggle stowed, of course. You're still losing altitude, you're still keeping up with the person in front of you, and you're giving a good time to the people that are behind you. Sometimes in competitions, I get people ask me, do you want to be first, second? Doesn't really matter. If you tell me to be last, I can be really slow, remove my slider fast, and go on the toggles and be slow. If you want me to be first, I can do free fall, open low. Maybe instead of, jump out at 6,000 feet, and instead of hopping and popping, I can free fall onto 4,000 feet, open, and remove the slider, and I'm doing my pattern. While I'm removing the slider, everything is done visual. You get to visualize and see what you're doing. Remove the slider with muscle memory, and then unstill the toggles. So that's one thing that's really good. If you learn how to remove your slider smoothly and through muscle memory, it will make your life much easier. So that's been it, guys. It's been a 20-minute video for a simple concept. Maybe we could call this video also housekeeping, but really doesn't matter. This has been it, guys. Hopefully you guys learned something from this video. If you did, and if you enjoyed the video, remember to give it the likes and subscribes and whatever. If you have any questions or complimentary information, you can add them in the comment section down below, and I see you guys next time.